So hello everybody, my name is Sherry Forsyth and I'm a peak performance coach, and what we're going to be speaking about today is yet another invisible illness where a lot of people are unable to speak about their health issues, and as a result of that there's a lot of misunderstanding. And so in this month of March we're doing a whole series on invisible illnesses so that our loved ones and our friends and our family can understand where we are, can understand how difficult it is to live with our illnesses, and therefore be able to treat us with more kindness and compassion. So today I welcome Rob and Pam Bircher, and they are going to start with Rob telling us what your disease is and what it is and how it's affecting you.
What it is what the name of the illness is that I've been diagnosed with. Sorry.
No problem. Just relax. Yeah, just relax.
It's called Parkinson's disease.
Okay, Parkinson's disease.
Can I
Thank
share
you.
about what it actually is?
Yes.
PD is a chronic disease of the nervous system where cells in the brain that produce dopamine start dying off gradually. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter, so it's involved in the whole body. And there's no known cause for Parkinson's disease, although triggers can be stress, particularly stress, and sometimes viral diseases. But there's no specific diagnostic test. They can't take a blood sample or something like that. So there are 4 signs of Parkinson's disease. There's bradykinesia, which is slowness of movement. There's clinical rigidity. There is
Is that rigidity of movement?
Of movement. It's normally a cogwheel effect that they test that with on your wrist,
Okay.
as far as I can work out. There's resting tremor and postural instability, which is balance and discoordination. So basically, if a person has all 4 signs, then it probably is PD. But if you only have 3, then it's possibly PD. But if it's only 2, then it's uncertain. And so only by putting you on PD meds and seeing whether you respond amazingly after 6 weeks will confirm a positive PD diagnosis. Rob only had slowness of movement and a bit of cognitive impairment, and his balance was not good, and he had discoordination when he swam, so we knew there was something wrong. He was also so very, very tired, a chronic fatigue that we realize now is a cellular fatigue. It wasn't from overdoing exercise or swimming or something like that.
Can I just interrupt there? That fatigue, can you try and explain to our listeners what that fatigue looks like, because you can see it in Rob, or what it feels like? Because most people who don't understand fatigue just say, if they say they're tired, it's because they didn't sleep well the night before, and they know that tomorrow they won't be fatigued anymore. So can you give us an idea of the fatigue that Rob has been experiencing?
I find that it's not directly related to my quality of my sleep, but just the condition. And I found my energy lasts for about 2 hours in the morning, and then I'm into a cycle of medicine up, medicine low, down, up, and so it becomes a cycle of fatigue versus energy.
Okay, so in other words, sleep doesn't affect that fatigue.
No, but obviously I take sleeping tablets.
Yeah.
Because I must sleep well.
Yes.
Otherwise you get very agitated and maybe depressed.
So it's not because of overdoing exercise or not sleeping well. And Rob initially described it as like he'd done 1,000 press-ups, but he hadn't done 1. That's how it felt. And rest is the only thing that helps. And then he could not believe the difference after only 5 weeks of being on PD meds. And more meds are needed as the disease progresses, because more cells are dying off and less dopamine is being produced. And there are side effects to certain meds. So especially the main Parkinson's meds. So you have to have that dosage really, you have to be on top of it with your neurologist.
Can you mention just a few of the side effects that people might suffer from as a result of the Parkinson's medications?
Nausea, dryness of mouth, and libido as well.
Okay.
And also dyskinesias.
Yes.
Rob doesn't have drastic dyskinesias, but some people really have dyskinesias, and it's not from the Parkinson's, often it's from the tablets. So
Yeah, so you almost don't know whether it is the disease or the side effect.
Alongside this, Parkinson's tablets are high-powered vitamins, vitamin C, enzyme Q10, and
So you take supplementation to keep your body as strong as you can, as well as the Parkinson's meds.
and in consultation with the neurologist, because
Sure.
they could clash directly.
Sure.
So natural remedies sometimes are a risk. They're very strong and they can clash with your meds.
Sure. So you're trying to keep a balance between. Okay. Any more that you want to add about the how it was, what it is, and how it was diagnosed, and the meds?
not the moment.
Okay. All right. So Rob, how long have you been suffering with Parkinson's?
I had symptoms since the end of 2008. It was only diagnosed in 2010. So just over 9 years, I think. I was 58 when I was diagnosed.
Okay. And it was obviously a bit of a road to get to the diagnosis.
A long road, yes.
Yeah, okay.
I went passed from one very good person to the next very good medic, but we weren't too sure.
Okay. So at the moment, your main doctor is a neurologist.
Yes.
That will be coping. Okay. Perfect. And so I would love you to speak now to our listeners about the challenges that you face individually and together with living with Parkinson's. And for people who are watching, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching the rebroadcast, if you have any comments that you'd like to add, helpful tips, as always, we welcome them. And if they are specifically for Rob and Pam, I will make sure that the information gets through to them. Or if you have any questions that you'd like to ask them, please feel free to write it in the comment box below. So, yes, let's have a look at the main challenges that you now face.
10 years down the line, the fatigue is the greatest issue for me. It affects everything I do, especially my speech, of late, the last year or two.
Okay.
I can get my voice loud, but then when I'm tired, I start stuttering, and my voice gets very soft, and this makes social conversation very challenging. I can't stand and talk in a local supermarket, for example, and I love people, so it's quite a wrench. I was a church pastor for some 30 years, so I needed to be medically boarded officially as a kind of any kind of stress which comes to you is harmful to your PD symptoms. Sometimes it's hard to find purpose in each day because I'm so restricted by my limited energy levels. I cope best by resting a lot and making sure that I take my meds on time. Resting and meds on time. As I came up the steps, I was swallowing my meds. Slightly early, but they're on time.
Okay. And Rob, can you feel the effects of the meds wear off, so you know you're due for your next?
I feel my coordination degenerates, and my face tenses, and my speech is impaired further.
Okay.
But I can't feel the opposite really. That's it. It comes in quietly. I cope best by resting, as I've said, and making sure I take my meds on time. I do not try to isolate. I do try not to isolate myself, because it's quite embarrassing to have a stutter and not to be able to be heard. You have to repeat yourself and you end up stuttering more and more. It's quite hard not to isolate yourself. So I have friendships that I keep up, one or two group activities as well. The PD support group, which I attend with Pam, my wife, has been a source of great information, inspiration, laughter, and sharing of tips and highs and lows. Some very courageous people there. Family support of 2 daughters and 2 sons has been amazing.
And wider family.
And our wider family too. And Pam, of course, is top of the list. I battle to read, so Pam reads to me virtually every day, and we have had really enjoyed reading some very great books, many biographies. My faith in Jesus, that He is in it with me, has been the motto that I've clung to. He is in it with me, not in front of me or in heaven, or miles away or in some church building somewhere. He is in it with me. And that's been a very, very bolstering truth. The medical help I get is from a psychiatrist in Durban.
A psychiatrist in Hawaii.
Psychiatrist in Hawaii.
Okay.
A neurologist in Durban, and a very, very empathetic GP in Hilton, where we live. And an outstanding pharmacist who gives us advice. I do battle with feeling sorry for myself. Pam's relentless encouragement has been amazing and really helps me. I look for things to be thankful for. E.g., I have no pain. I'm very grateful that I have no pain. I really am. I don't suffer from depression. I even laugh in my sleep.
Thank you, Rob. Pam, would you like to add anything to that question?
I think I'll probably in a little bit more conversation, some things will come out.
Okay. Okay. So, Pam, we're going to ask you now, and I know that you and Rob have spoken about this. If someone's recently diagnosed with Parkinson's, what advice would you give them? Because you've walked this road now for 9 years.
I tell them that PD is not a death sentence.
Okay.
It can be managed, and there is lots of hope and lots of help around. To give you a quality of life, the best quality you can have under the circumstances. And very important, I want to underline it, every person's form of PD is different. So some people will not have a tremor and won't battle with cutting things and all, stuff like that, or writing or whatever it might be. But so the important thing is not to compare yourself with anybody else who's got Parkinson's. And that was a revelation to me at the beginning. Then I would say learn as much as you can about the disease.
And is there a lot of information available for you? Where did you find a lot of your information?
Lots of information on the internet, especially the excellent website put out by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. It's www.michaeljfox.org. And they have a webinar section on all sorts of topics.
Oh, wonderful.
And you can look them up. And you can subscribe to their newsletter on their website. And that's very valuable because they tell you about all the latest research things that are happening, and there's lots of research happening and lots of money put into Parkinson's research, especially in the States. They're trying to find a cause, they're trying to find a cure, they're trying to find what prevents it happening. So there's a form of depression that is peculiar to Parkinson's disease alone, and it's not due to the circumstances you suddenly find yourself in. I can't work while this. It's not circumstantial, it's because it's a neurotransmitter disease.
Because it's affecting the dopamine, which
Yes.
is one of the feel-good hormones like serotonin.
Yes, that's
so it's a chemically induced...
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
And so you need to get medical help for that. Don't think you can't. You will, and the meds do help. Rob has not had depression, but people we know have. And then also get, as Rob has mentioned, get meds to help if you can't sleep. You need to sleep. And then exercise, exercise, exercise for as long as you can was the advice we got at the very first appointment after we were diagnosed from the neurologist. But don't overdo the exercise. So that's an adaptation. Whereas you would try and get fitter and fitter by doing more and more exercise, all you have to do is just exercise, and that's quite a mind change.
And so what kind of exercise and how often do you exercise?
Well, we have tried class routines, but we haven't kept up with that because it was actually too vigorous for me and my fatigue didn't help. So I used to swim quite a lot, but I then gave up. I couldn't handle the conversations with the coaches there, people there, greet them. I tried to forget their names and feel very awful and go rather not go back. And then Pamela and I are down to 1 kilometre walk that we take slowly.
Okay, and you do that pretty much every day?
No, not every day. Maybe about 3 or 4 times a week.
Okay.
Depending on the Hilton weather and the mist and the rain.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then very important, and this really is important, avoid eating protein within the 1.5 hour period before you take your PD meds, and don't eat protein for a half an hour after you take your PD meds, because protein and dopamine meds compete with each other for absorption into your system.
Oh, so interesting.
So the catchphrase, take your tablets on an empty stomach, reminds you that 1.5 hours hopefully get past as much as possible.
Sure.
And then right at the very beginning, our neurologist said to us, because everybody was telling us, take this, take that, take the next thing, I asked her what supplements. So she said, very high dose of vitamin C, very high dose of vitamin E, and coenzyme Q10. We didn't understand the coenzyme Q10, but in the presence of a chronic disease, your natural body's coenzyme Q10 gets depleted.
And also, if I can add in, for people who are suffering from any autoimmune condition, high doses of vitamin C is usually required.
Yes,
so.
Yes. And then go to a PD support group if possible, and if possible with your carer, because there's lots of camaraderie. It's such an inspiring time. Rob avoided it for a long time. He thought, I don't want to see what I could be like one day, but it's not been like that at all. And then don't avoid social contact because it gives color to your life. But be careful of overdoing it. So for example, when we visit our family in Durban for the weekend, Rob has to rest severely the beginning of the next week.
Yeah.
So, but we wouldn't change that because that's just wonderful. And then remember not to say, I've got PD, but I am living with PD. And somebody in our PD support group always says that, and it's been such an inspiration to us both.
Absolutely.
And if tomorrow, I will be thrilled.
Yeah. Can I ask you, just for our listeners who are in South Africa who might want to make contact with you, where is your support group based?
It's based in Howick.
In Howick. Okay. And for
at the Greendale Frail Care Centre. They're in lockdown at the moment due to COVID-19, but normally it's the last Thursday of every month at 10 o'clock in the Greendale dining room.
Okay, that's fabulous. If you need more details, please don't hesitate to make contact with us, and I'll put you in touch with Pam and Rob. And so the support group, how many people belong to it?
On the address list, there must be about 30.
Really?
And sometimes it's the wife, and the husband is the carer, and vice versa.
Okay. So is there anything else you would like to add that you think it's quite important that you might want to say about living positively? I would like to add, not just living with Parkinson's, but living positively with Parkinson's.
For me, I've been taken aback by the cognitive struggle, because my brain is so much slower, and I can't remember things as I used to, and I can't formulate, even when I type. I really, my fingers don't work well, and so that's been a problem. But I've persevered, and I try and do sudokus and crossword puzzles and that sort of thing, just to keep my brain going, because it's got a long way to go still.
And do you find that frustrating, Rob?
Yeah.
Rob did a lot of watercolor painting, and it used to relax him wonderfully. But he finds he can't always do that so much. He can't always keep his whole arm steady as he does it, which is a very slight dyskinesia. The other problem he had was when the dopamine was low overnight, his toes curled badly in the morning, and it was like a terrible vicious cramp, and then he couldn't walk. So there are little tips and things that we have to do about handling them.
Particularly slow release magnesium,
Yes.
and that brought a halt to that.
That affected that helped the cramping.
Yes, that's the other supplement. We take slow
release magnesium.
No, he takes a slow release PD med during the night, sometime when he wakes up, say 3 in the morning, and that has helped also.
Okay. Now, when Pam and I bumped into each other in our local supermarket a few weeks ago, you mentioned red light therapy.
Yes.
And I'm sure that many of our listeners will be quite fascinated to know what it is and whether you found that there's been any benefit yet.
I think it has stayed a bit of the progress of the disease, especially because of Parkinson's area of the brain where the dopamine is very deep. But the cognitive part of your brain is right near the surface. He's been wearing a helmet, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night. And you can find all the details about that on www.redlightsonthebrain.com. That's where we got all the information. We had to import the lights from Hong Kong because you can't find them in South Africa, or we couldn't. And recently there was a neurologist in Durban who was on carte blanche, and he spoke about it as well. And we've made contact with him just to find out what it's all about. And he does a slightly different treatment with infrared and near infrared, where it's a laser treatment with it. But the light therapy is harmless. We've spoken to our neurologists about it. They're no human trials, but they said it can't harm. So we went for it.
Good for you. Courageous decision. I think there are lots of complementary things that are being investigated with regards to Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and lots of neurological things where they're finding that supplementation and obviously your diet, exercise, and things like the red and blue light, which have been kind of poo-pooed for a long time. I think the doctors are the research is showing that those things really do have a massive benefit. So well done for being courageous enough just to say we're going to be doing this. And I'd like to thank both of you very much for giving of your time and your expertise to tell us about Parkinson's. And for those viewers who might be suffering from Parkinson's themselves, or maybe a loved one is, please make contact, and let's, as we've always said, we want to blow the silence away from these invisible illnesses. We want people to be able to speak about them in a very real and authentic way. And so if you have anything you'd like to add or say, please feel free to do so.
I just want to say that people say to me often, Rob's looking so well, but a half an hour later, they don't see him. And that can often be an issue. Rob says, people think I'm so well, but actually back home, I'm not. And so, we understand that. And sometimes I say up front to people, Rob's got Parkinson's disease. So he doesn't have to explain himself. And then people understand. And it's also one thing we've noticed. In conversation, don't speak to me only. Please include Rob.
Yes.
Look at him. That is a very important thing.
Along those same lines, I have an aunt whose late husband was in a wheelchair. And when they would go out for a meal at a restaurant, the waiters would only speak to her, and they would bring the bill to her. And so those kind of things are very painful, very difficult to deal with as the person who is suffering from the illness, and also as his wife or husband, because you can't say to people, look at him, ask him a question. So that's a really good tip for when people are suffering with an illness, particularly one where it might be difficult to speak, like Parkinson's and various others, is just to remember that the person is not the disease. The person is still the person.
Absolutely.
And is still in there. And if you can try and be as normal as possible, and like, for example, if somebody is stuttering, don't try and help them, don't pressurize them along. Just step back and give them the time to formulate their thoughts and to formulate their words.
Yes, our friends have been amazing that way. The close ones we have really do listen. And that's great. And then just one other thing I wanted to say was, now I've forgotten, was as a carer, let your spouse or whoever it is who's got the disease do whatever they can for themselves. It's very important.
So even if they're battling, Pam,
Yes.
let them battle a bit.
Yes.
In order to achieve whatever you're trying to.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, because if you help them too much, are you going to be disabling them?
Probably.
Okay.
And I can tell, I mean, I've lived with Rob with this disease for so long now, I can tell when he's struggling. And sometimes we might have people round to tea, for example, and he gets very quiet. And then he'll offer to get up and make more tea, and I let him do that because he'd rather I carried on with the conversation and he did something. He has to move, and that's helpful.
Well, super. Thank you again, Rob and Pam. And leave your comments for us. And thank you, as always, for giving your time, listeners, to listening to us discuss these invisible illnesses. And we look forward to chatting next week, where I'm going to be interviewing Jill Collar, who was interviewed about a year ago as the chemo conqueror. And now she really has conquered the chemo, and she's conquered cancer. And she is going to be speaking on the side effects and the effects of treatment that the doctors don't tell you about, that have quite long-lasting effects. So I'd love to see you there, 12 o'clock on a Thursday. The chemo conqueror will be back.